would like to welcome you to a UX writing themed UX Monday. And the first talk we're going to have is from Nathan. Nathan is a UX writer, UI writer, system writer from Škoda Auto. And he's going to be talking about how, as a UX writer, he works on a design system and how to write an award-winning documentation. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks. Right, so let's get into this. Who is this presentation actually for? I mean, it's mainly for UX writers, obviously, but designers and product owners, creative technologists, developers, they might find this useful. It really is just aimed at anybody who is thinking about creating a design system or currently using a design system and is faced with the prospect of writing some documentation. So there's that. This is me. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of things that I've done, but basically, like it was mentioned, I already work for Škoda Auto, and I am a UX writer working in a design system team. So there we go. Okay, I think everybody would probably know this, but maybe some people don't, and I'll just go over it briefly because it's not always obvious what documentation means. It's a word with lots of different meanings. But when we talk about design systems and UX writing, we're talking about documentation being like the instruction manual that you kind of hand over to designers and developers so that they can create your products. So as you know, like the user interface of a digital product is created from different components. So you've got styles and pattern libraries that are usually centralized in one place. Most people choose Figma to do it, but you can do it in other places if you want to. There's no rules in this game. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And developers, they need the specs to create the final product. I mean, yeah, they can use Inspect and Figma, we know this, but like there's other pieces of information in there. Designers need to know like how the components work and how they're used in your interface. And most importantly, UX writers need to know microcopy rules in order to create UI text. Every product is different, every brand is different, and normally they'll have some kind of documentation which contains microcopy rules that tell you basically how you make your product, how you have the text. I don't know how many words you can have on a button or what kind of casing style you're going to use. So all that kind of information needs to be documented somewhere, and that's what we call documentation. For people who are kind of new to design systems, I'm just going to say that they're going to be around for a while. And as brands increasingly create more and more digital products, it's going to just further strengthen like the need for a design system. So as I've got here, as you can see there on the screen, if you're building more than one digital product, yeah, you should probably make one. And if you want to easily update your products, I mean, imagine you just want to change, I don't know, the colors of all your checkboxes in one click. Well, there you go, design system, easy. And yeah, having all your assets in one place, design system, easy. And the really important one at the end is if you want to save money, because obviously paying developers costs lots of money. And if you have to redo the process every time you create a new product, well, it gets really expensive. And that's what you will see in the next slide. This is sourced, and you can Google it, whatever, right? Or you can just take this presentation afterwards and just click the text because I've linked everything. But basically, Lloyds Banking Group, which is like the big nasty evil banking group from the UK, they claim that they saved over £7 million in just 2 years by using Design System to effectively reskin all the different UI for their products. They own lots of different banks, and they just wanted to make some banking apps, and they just reused all the components and the interface. Easy, right? So when you start adding up all the cost savings that a design system can bring you, then it starts to really make sense. So there's that. Okay, as mentioned, I work for Škoda, and we have a design system, and it's called Flow. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Flow and why it was an award-winning system. And so yeah, we won the Red Dot the Red Dot Design Award last year. Our design system covers 4 environments: web, mobile, in-car, because obviously cars have computers in them now, and also voice assistants, so like chatbot as well. Our design system also contains like information about digital experience, brand foundation, and some like writing guidelines as well. So it's pretty comprehensive. I've been working on it for 2 years, and it's yeah, it's awesome. Why do we call it Flow? Well, we just like, wanted to say that like all of our libraries and stuff like seamlessly flow from one project to another. The digital experience itself adapts to different touch points like water, and every design system needs a cool name. So there you go. That's why we called it Flow. Like I was mentioning about adapting to different touch points, this is just like an example, so you're not like, rebuilding everything all the time. You're just adapting and using the same components from touch point to touch point. We have a little bit of a philosophy. It's not like culty or anything, but we do appreciate that, when you're spending all of these hours, days, and weeks creating digital products, the ability to reuse components and UI and patterns and styles is like it's pretty cool. You don't have to keep redoing everything over and over again. There's also another important aspect to this, which is, people aren't really talking about digital carbon footprints, but when you're making like digital products on like a huge scale, the ability to actually cut down on the amount of data you're using, the amount of storage, all this kind of thing, it does add up, especially like on an industrial scale. So so there you go. I mean, most people they're thinking about plastic straws and all this kind of stuff, but you're not really thinking about data centers. And there's like millions of these things all over the world, just using massive amounts of energy to just store, I don't know, your iCloud photos from 7 years ago. Anyway, yeah, so like the ability to reuse stuff, especially components in the UI, it's great, especially when making lots of different products, lots of different touch points. It's awesome because it's fractal, right? Whoa. Anyway, that's enough. Anyway, just wanted to have a little bit of fun before we get into like this sort of nerdy stuff. And to do that, I thought I'd just tell you some fun facts about text because, writing and stuff is cool. It's our craft. That's why we love it. All right, this is like my number one thing that I tell people when they're sort of like downplaying UX writing, or they're downplaying the need to hire a writer, or like anyone can write, just like what? It's so easy, right? Anyone can do it. Well, I mean, try and find me a digital product that exists that like has no text. I don't know. Find me a video game that doesn't have any text. Find me any piece of software that runs without text. Good luck. So here you can see on the right, you got the nice kitten app. There's no text, and I don't have a clue how it works. So good luck with that. Here's my fun fact number 2. Artificial intelligence cannot create text that matches the complexity of human language. It just can't. I mean, you've got Midjourney. We're making all these like cool, weird, scary paintings and stuff and whatever, but it's not really like creating language yet. Language is technology, typography is design, and text is what humans need in order to operate digital products. Human language is older than you may realize. This is Aborigine cave painting in Australia, and it's actually a form of language. It's like people leaving their handprints. And I saw this in person, I don't know, about 7 years ago. And yeah, it's technology. It's just like not what you think it is. Anyway, the history of human language is also shrouded in mystery. And from my point of view, this makes it more interesting, especially English, when you really like learn about King James and how the language was all created by these priests, and then you have all these words with like hidden meanings in them, and on it goes. It's fascinating stuff. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way, we can like get into the kind of meat of the matter, shall we say? Better hurry up because I'm kind of waffling and I think we're going to go about 10 minutes left. Anyway, where to begin? Start at the start. Assess your audience for your design system, establish your design system needs, and understand what your product audience needs are going to be. My personal opinion is that you should write all your documentation in English. If you're making some product that's just aimed at one market and your entire team only speaks a specific language, then sure, like do it in another language. But you know, most remote design teams these days are bilingual. Most people's second language is English. On and on it goes. It just makes sense. Okay, before you actually start anything, before you start creating any documentation for your design system, I think it's a good idea to create and distribute a glossary of the vocabulary and terminology that you're going to use. So focus on acronyms, abbreviations, anything that's like internal or brand related. It might seem really obvious to you what a VID is or an APW or whatever, but if you have a new designer joining your team, they're just like not going to know what you're talking about, and that's annoying. So stay on the same page, make sure that your design system team, so that's like your designers, developers, all the people involved, make sure they are aware of the different styles of UX and UI text and content, because you know it's quite easy just to call everything copy or text or whatever, but there's different types, and people need to be aware of, you know, the different styles of fonts and typography and casing styles and language variants and on it goes. You should ask, as the writer, because I'm trying to talk to you guys as writers. I hope you're all here thinking it might be UX writers, or maybe you are already, but you should ask what the brand that you're working for, what does their digital experience look like? Try and imagine what products are going to come in the future, what environments they cover. This will help you for what I'm about to tell you next. So ways of working. I'm going to try and speed it up, but yeah, we'll just organize a kickoff meeting, share your terminology, discuss your next steps, which is going to be, I'm going to tell you, is the component roadmap. This is like super important to get the documentation done for your design system. Schedule regular meetings, try and keep those meetings about design system stuff only, because people love to, you know, go on tangents. I'm sure you all know. Create a Slack channel. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious stuff, but if you don't write it down and tell people, it's like, you know, not always so obvious. This is a good one. I think if you're a writer, you should ask lots of questions. I mean, you have to, right? You have to kind of think of yourself as a journalist, ask questions, even if you think they're stupid. And, you know, just don't worry, because people aren't expecting you to be a developer or a designer. They're expecting you to be a writer. So it makes sense to kind of ask those more obvious questions, and that will help you later on. Okay, this is my personal opinion again, but like I feel like just using Figma as the main tool, or Sketch or XD, whatever you want, but like basically as a writer, don't get bogged down in saving Word documents or text edit docs. Have a system in place for approving your text before you upload it to the design system platform, and just really just keep it simple. Like, don't be precious over your text. Don't think that you're going to look at it in 3 years' time and change something. Like, you're just not. I promise you. All right, super important one. This is kind of like the backbone of your documentation. This is the thing that's really going to help you get everything laid out, and that's a component roadmap. Okay, so this is where you need to define all your component terminology first. Create a dedicated file, that will really help. Remember that components often have different names, like even the same component can be called different things by different brands, and in different touch points, they can function in different ways. For example, like I've said there, bottom sheets for mobile, but they don't exist for web, and so on and so on. Here, you know, this is just a quick look at some of the other design system documentation that's out there. And as you can see, you know, Apple pluralized buttons, so does Material, but you know, Carbon, they don't, right? And there's just so many like little different variations between the different design systems. And you know, it's kind of because people are copying each other and making up their own stuff. And anyway, it's just for you to figure out and sort out with your team. and just make sure everyone's on the same page. That's like super important. Some things to think about when you're devising your component terminology. Like I mentioned, like, should you pluralize or not? I actually prefer plural because I think it's rare that you're just going to have one button on a UI. You're probably going to have two, but anyway, it's irrelevant. Well, it's not, but anyway, casing, Carbon, for example, they're using sentence casing. We try to use sentence casing. Other places like the Goldman Sachs design system, they're using title casing. So these are only minor details, but they do help if you just have it all laid out at the start. Another great thing that I think you should do is apply the atomic approach to your components, because it's really good to like set a boundary between what are basically the smallest functioning components on the UI compared to the more complex ones. And if you're working with different product teams, it's really helpful as a way to separate who is going to do what and who's going to take care of what, right? Because you don't want your design system team doing everything and vice versa. So that's the atomic approach. Thanks, Brad Frost. This is something we do at Škoda, and it's really simple, and it's just you just use an emoji in your Figma page file name, and you just use a colored circle. It's really obvious, but honestly, it makes life so much easier. So pretty straightforward. Green is good, amber is work in progress, red is blocked. Easy, right? But it's just those little things that make this whole process so much smoother. Okay, so the actual documentation, like the way that you structure it, the hierarchy of the content. You need to define this based on your design system needs. You need to keep it fairly consistent throughout the documentation, because your audience is going to be familiar. You might be making a public design system. You might really want to show off everything, like how some of the big brands do it. So yeah, look and copy other design systems, take ideas from them, look at how they structure their documentation. This is how we do it. Like, this is just one example. This is buttons on mobile touchpoint, and I'm just giving like an example on the left of like a way you could set it up, and then for specific components when they have variations in them, you can just add those in. That's up to you. But yeah, just make a structure, right? It's not brain surgery. Okay, so a little bit about writing styles in documentation. These are some things that I think it's really useful if you know the terminology of these things. We don't have to go into massive details, but it's just handy, right? Because like I said earlier, not everything can just be called copy or text, because that's not correct. Like, there are lots of different styles of text. You might have different team members creating different pieces of text in your team, and yeah, it's just good to know, right? So I just need a little sip of something. Excuse me, getting a little dry in the mouth. All right, here's some tips. These are just things that I think are really like easy but useful. If you've got more than two items on the list, don't use comma, and just use some bullet points. It's way easier to read. Legibility, use clear formatting. You should think about your casing and reduce punctuation where possible. I think all these tips are really useful just for UX writing in general. We're not writing Shakespeare, we're not writing novels, we're just trying to create really easy to read text. So there you go. Measure everything, delete anything that's not useful, and like I said earlier, technical terminology is fine just as long as everyone is going to understand it, especially the people in your team. I think it's also useful to learn a bit of Unicode, but we don't really have time to go into that today. Okay, trying to wrap this up now. The art of copying, super useful. Okay, so I think that you should visit the component.gallery. it's kind of like a unbiased design system because it just tells you about components. It's not like Apple's or it's not Carbon's or IBM's or whatever. It's just like a basic one, like a generic one. And yeah, copying is like what our entire world is founded upon, especially like in software development and even UX writing. So just look at as much design system documentation as you can. Nearly every big brand has one these days. And just, yeah, like nice etiquette. Like if you copy some text from another design system, then just be nice and rewrite it slightly. Don't just like copy and paste it. That's rude. So that's my opinion anyway. Component gallery, easy. Hopefully you'll look at it later. Okay, what else can you do with a design system documentation? I mean, in my opinion, I think you can do way more than just having like instruction manuals for components. I think you can talk about your digital experience, your customer experience, tone of voice, brand foundation, your corporate identity, accessibility guidelines, really, really big hot topic these days. Writing style guidance and just product writing guides in general. You can put all of that stuff in with your design system documentation. If you're hosting it on a platform like Zero Height or Frontify, then why not, right? It's going to be like there online 24/7. Anyone can look at it. So there you go. The key question, does it have to be so boring? Traditionally, instruction manuals are boring. They just tell you what to do in a really bland way. And I think I found a way to combat that, which other designers and developers appreciate, and that's just to leave little Easter eggs wherever you can. And there you go. Okay, some quick tips on tools for agile writers. This is kind of like my tool setup. This is what I try and work with. I really don't miss the days of having like 10 different Adobe programs and all that kind of stuff. I just like how simple things can be these days. I really think all you need to use to create good documentation is Figma, a design system platform such as, I don't know, like I said earlier, Zero Height, Frontify, whatever. There's like loads of different ones that are basically just hosting platforms. You need a web browser, obviously. You can use Grammarly and Hemingway app if you want to. They're pretty useful tools. I wouldn't rely on them for everything, especially Grammarly. It does miss quite a fair few things. Also, if you're working on like top secret projects, you perhaps don't want to upload stuff to Grammarly because, it does harvest data. That's just how it works. Obviously, Word and text edit can help polish stuff up or even spot those mistakes if you don't want to upload your text to a platform. If you want to use a project management tool, that's up to you. I don't personally use one because I just don't need to and don't need to add another layer onto my workflow. So yeah, just keep it simple. And that is pretty much it. I do want to thank these people. I'm not going to read out all their names, but these are all awesome people who helped make Flow Design System. And wow, can you believe it? I've actually like finished on time, and there's me. So you can like keep in contact. Thanks, guys. So thanks. There we go.
Thank you to you, Nathan. Now we have the Q&A. I'm going to start with the most voted question in Slido, then we're going to switch to in-person questions. So the first one is, can you define UX copy directly in the design system?
Can you define it? What do you mean? Like you describe like what it is, or for storing different pieces of copywriting, or?
I would say if you can like literally put something and let's say button. Let's say this error message, it's gonna be like this for components.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it would never change, but definitely you can really go into some detail with your microcopy rules. You can talk about the amount of words you would have on a button. It's quite a hot topic that we have. You you can talk about casing style, whether you allow punctuation on your button, but I would definitely lump that all into microcopy rules. And yeah, I think that's a good idea, right? Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, does anybody have a question here? Nobody.
Where's the link to Slido?
You just go to Slido, just put it in Google, Slido. I think it's slido.com, but also slido, and then it's UX Monday. Yeah. Or you can, since it looks like you have a question, maybe you can ask directly. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry, it was horrible. Anybody else? There's sorry, she raised her hand first.
I have a question about language. You said the language is quite important as well humans. Do you have any advice for maybe international community who have a culture to write very long text? I would say, for example, no offense to French people, but it is a novel just to comprehend one question. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, you can definitely the Hemingway app. I don't know if you've ever looked at that, but that's a great way of just uploading some English text, and it will flag up if sentences are way too long. But really, I mean, just as the role as the writer, you should be really, looking at a text, measuring every single word, asking yourself, does that need to be there? And then just delete. So yeah, and back to the language kind of aspect. I'm really talking about using English only to create the documentation, because you just have to imagine that, like, with a modern remote design team, it's going to be full of bilingual speakers, and I think it's just useful if we just agree on like one language to speak and use. English is kind of the simplest. It's one of the shortest. Languages typically translate into longer character counts when you've translated from English. And yeah, but I mean, if you've got a French writer and they're writing all this long English text, and just, tell them, hey, you need to like cut that down. So yeah.
Thank you.
We have a new popular question. Hopefully it's just yes or no. Is Skoda Flow an open source?
It's public. There are parts of it that are publicly available. There are some parts of it that are not publicly available because, the automotive industry takes like the infotainment side of things really serious. But yeah, you can find Škoda Flow online, and you can read our documentation. You can read all the microcopy rules that I've written. So yeah.
Thank you. I saw that you have a question.
So I want to ask, could you clarify that when you say using just Figma, so you just basically use text objects inside of Figma, and then you write the rules inside of the Figma? Is that correct?
Yeah. Because we try and keep everything in one place.
Okay, and follow-up question: could you show us like example of that? Can you just find something which is not under NDA?
No,
Nah.
sorry. If there might be some Škoda people in the crowd, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Fair
lose
enough,
my
fair
job.
enough.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But the documentation is, like I said, some of it is live online. It's hosted by Frontify, and you can find some parts there. And it's the same. We just keep it on Figma because that's where we made it. And sometimes it's just easier to access it there because designers are already, using the UI libraries and stuff. But yeah, there's quite a lot of it publicly available. So yeah. Thanks for your question.
Another question is, what kind of challenges do you have with writing car UI text that you don't face writing mobile or web copy? How is the documentation different?
Oh yeah, that is a great question. Well, we have a lot of rules and ergonomics and tappable areas and reachability things that we need to think about when we're writing for in-car. I didn't write those, but I've read all that documentation myself. And as somebody who also has driven a car for like over 10 years, you do get into that mindset where you're really thinking that you know, the documentation, the microcopy rules that you create for those components, you really are thinking about them as somebody who's driving, and you know, you're really just trying to write the simplest way that you can for the UI of the infotainment I'm talking about. And obviously, when you're writing the documentation for that kind of stuff, you do like think of that, and you have to take it into account. And yeah, but yeah, that's a great question. I hope I answered it properly.
Any more questions here? I think I saw some hands before. No? Okay, let's go with slide then. Where to start to get stakeholders buy-in to have the documentation in the design system?
Just tell them about all the money they're going to save.
Can you give us some numbers, you know, some very specific numbers we can use?
That Lloyds Banking study that I quickly flashed up in the slide, they saved £7 million by just using a design system to, like I said, reuse the components for all the different banking apps. And that study is super easy to Google. You just Google Lloyds Banking design system. It's called Constellation. Just Google it, the study will come up. And it's even quite an old study. It's from 2019. So, you know, they saved millions on coding and development. So it's a pretty good argument for having a design system. And if you have a design system, you need to have documentation.
That's a great one. Another one, what are some examples of accessibility guidelines in terms of UX writing?
Well, like I mentioned, there's like as I mentioned, I haven't really wrote any myself, but so I'm not going to declare myself as an expert here or anything, but we do have them that Škoda has internally about reachability and tappability, and obviously contrast ratios are like a really big one. There's a website, I should know it, but because I'm feeling the pressure of talking to loads of strangers, I can't remember it. But there is a website on accessibility and contrast ratios for colors, which you should really check out, because if you're not using white or black text on a color, it can be difficult for people with visual impairments to see. So yeah, I just wish I could remember what that website was called. Maybe
So if
someone.
you remember later, just let us know and we'll add it into the event so you can find it. Last chance before you can start eating pizza. Or is it, I don't know, if you're hungry, you can go for pizza directly. But last chance to ask questions to Nathan. Škoda Auto, UX writer, design system writer. Okay, that's it then. Well, thank you very much, Nathan, for giving a talk today. Okay, this is the second speaker, Lucia. She's from Kiwi, and she's going to be talking about how to get a buy-in for UX writing in your company. Very hot topic that we researched before and found out is the #1 topic for UX writers, because they often feel like they are kind of just glorified copywriters in the end of the process. So Lucia is going to be showing us how they do it in Kiwi. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello, can you hear me like this? Isn't it too loud? Okay. I'm really glad I have this talk after the break and you're not hungry anymore because it might be a little boring, or yeah, let's see about it. So, my name is Lucia. As I said, I'm a content designer at kiwi.com. I've been with the company for a number of years already, but I've been in the content role only for something over 3 years. And that's why I'll mostly talk about our story, how we actually managed to go around getting buy-in for the UX writing discipline, and how it works for us now. And I also add some tips for you, what can you do if you want to get the buy-in within your company, whether you're a UX writer or you just want to hire the first one. But before we start with any of that, I thought we should probably talk a little about why are we even talking about this topic. I mean, you already said that it's a number one topic, but I think it deserves a little explanation why should you be actually interested in this. So I'll try to illustrate it with a little story from a family vacation, or rather a start of it. As many Czech and Slovak families in here, we once went to a family trip to Croatia, which means we traveled by car. And we set off at night to avoid the morning traffic and kind of get to the beach as soon as possible and enjoy our day there, the full day there as soon as we can. But at the time, there already was a possibility to download the mobile app navigation or mobile navigation to your phone, but my dad didn't really trust it very much. He didn't think it can, help any more than the integrated navigation system he already had in his car. So we followed the original old navigation in there. And as it happened, it led us to a closed road somewhere in the Hungarian countryside, and it took us like a couple of hours to actually turn back and find another way forward. Why I'm telling you this is that if only I would like to make a little analogy between this and the UX writing discipline, because if only we actually had the mobile app with freshly downloaded maps, this probably wouldn't have happened, and we could have gotten to our destination faster and actually be there on time, but we did not. And UX writing is really similar to this. And sorry, I haven't been practicing this very much, so I don't remember what I wanted to say. But the main idea I had was that the original navigation in the car wasn't really bad. It did its job. Like, it usually got us where we needed to be on time, and it helped us many times before to actually get to the destination. But the UX writing can actually be similar to the map updates you can get for your mobile app, because it enhances the UX design process. That is not broken, but it can help you get a better experience from it and get to your destination without the unnecessary roadblocks. Of course, there might be some bumps on the road still, but we can prepare for them a little bit better. As you can see here, maybe, as you can see here, based on this definition, UX writing does exactly that. Like, it uses content or designs with content to help you get where you need to be. And if my dad back then only trusted the new thing, we would probably have gotten there as well as we wanted to. But we did not. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the discipline just in case you don't have any UX writers on your team. So as Nathan already mentioned as well, the UX writing discipline can have many names. They all describe something different, but as there's no naming convention yet, people in all these roles can actually be easily doing the same thing as we, for example. And what brings them together or ties them together are these like layers of content that start with some problem definition at the beginning. First, you need to know what are you actually writing, who are you writing for, what are your business goals, what your users need. Then you need to go further up to the structure. You need to come up with content or an info hierarchy maybe that's actually usable and accessible to your users. And finally, you get on the top to the surface level where you do the final polishing and refinement. This is the thing that most of the UX writers usually do in the companies nowadays, and that's why maybe it's such a problem for them, and they feel maybe undervalued. And this probably reminds you of something if you're in the UX world, and that's because it's based on the layers of user experience this is a pretty old thing, and I think everybody might be familiar with it. And what this shows is that UX writing is practically design. It really, you need the same levels, and you need the same amount of space, or at least more space, to be able to do it properly and actually get the most out of it. And we're getting to the next part, and that's our story, where I'll try to share a little bit more about how we started, or how it was when I joined the design team. I joined the design team back in 2019, when there was one UX writer and one UX content manager at the time. So as you can see, they were already called UX writers, which means that there already was a little bit of a buy-in in there. People in the design team knew that they need a writer on the team, and they were willing to hire another person, me, to actually help the discipline grow. But it doesn't mean that everything was great, and I think I can say that we actually faced the same issues or problems as anybody else in this field, which means that we were usually coming in at the end of the process. The requests we would get usually sounded like, oh, can you have a quick look and polish this so we can hand it off? Or, I've been looking at this for a couple of hours already and I don't know what to do with it and how to write it. Can you do your magic? And things like that. So basically we came right at the end, and we couldn't really affect the design or information hierarchy or anything like that if there was an issue, because it was already going to the handoff. And one more thing maybe I forgot to mention, we localized to, I think, more than 20 languages in Kiwi. And this was a problem as well, because everything was, sometimes the copy was even prepared for localization or even sent to the translators before we could do anything. Another problem was that we were all working asynchronously. Back at the time, we were usually handed the designs in abstract or in vision, and we had to comment with the copy. This means that we didn't actually make any edits. We couldn't see our copy in the designs before approving it. And the edits were done by the UX designers, which sometimes meant that they maybe overlooked our comments, or they made typos if they decided to write it down instead of copy-paste the text. And also, what was the worst, sometimes it even happened that the designers were all working on a different iteration or a new version of the design, and we were working in the wrong file. So all our work was basically useless, and we had to start again. When we switched to Figma, this started to be a little bit better because of the collaborative aspect of it, but the designers still weren't really keen on letting us in and messing up with their designs, of course, at the beginning. All of this also meant that we actually had no opportunity to test our work and improve it, because as we came too late in the process, the usability testings were usually done before it. So the design was tested with the old copy, or the original copy that was written by the designer. And we couldn't actually see if the fixes we would make in the copy, and we would definitely usually change those things there, if they had any effect, actually, and we didn't know if they really helped. And the last thing that was a little problematic was that we were all over the place. We worked on too many tasks, and we basically had no time to change things, or felt like we have no time to do it. So I was thinking that it could all be better if I could only convince others that content matters and I can do more. And I was trying to communicate this and, complain and talk about how we're not valued in the team. But then I quickly realized that this doesn't make any sense, because this is not how you show people or how you tell people that something works. For example, it's the same as is in any UX. As a designer, you wouldn't tell people that your product is great. You would simply show them, because if you tell them it's great and the experience sucks, they would probably not use it anyway. So this is when I realized that this is what we have to do. We have to show what we can do and how it actually helps the designers and PMs and all the stakeholders, how it helps to improve the metrics, how it helps to bring better experience to our users, and so on. So this is another part, and it's about how we actually did it, how we got a seat at the table. And there are many things or many approaches to this, but I'll share a simple 6 steps that worked for me personally. So I'll be speaking only from experience and don't bullshit with some other things. So the first thing I did was the thing that I do best and any designer or writer should do well. It's that I ask questions. It's not like I didn't ask questions before, but now I decided to ask them more deliberately and ask even the stupidest things, asking things that were obvious. As long as they weren't stated anywhere or the answers weren't possible to find, I would ask. And did this it brought some results for us right at the start. First, of course, the most natural one, we had more context and we could do our work better. But it also showed us some problems, or the answers we got brought us some surprises that nobody in the team actually counted with, which means we had to change the designs, and that way we could actually affect it at a later stage as well. And all of this also made our PMs and UX designers back at the time realize that it's just more effective to include us earlier on, because they don't have to explain it again, they don't have to change the designs at the last minute, and it's just easier for everybody to do it all at the same time and be on track. So another thing with it was getting invited to meetings, or get ourselves or myself invited to meetings. It strongly ties to the previous one, and it means that I had to be a little annoying, of course. Like every time I would see something in a calendar or somebody would mention that they have a design critique or something interesting, a kickoff of a new project that I was supposed to work on, I would just ask them to invite me. And surprisingly, the answer they gave me was usually, "Oh, I thought you were already there," or "Oh, I didn't know you were interested in this." So they just sent me the invite right away, and it was pretty easy and made really a huge change for us, because we could understand the problem better. We got direct feedback on our copy. It wasn't through another third person. We could ask more questions, and we also had space to iterate because we were there earlier on, and we could think about it before the final handoff. Another thing I did was initiating collaboration and building relationships with the broader team. So, for example, if there was a design I was supposed to work on and it wasn't clear enough, or just slightly not clear enough, I would ask the UX designer to walk me through it in Figma on a live session. I would invite them for jams or pair writing sessions where we would actually try to come up with the content together. And this helped to show them that it's not really so easy to write the final content, and it's not easy to do it if you don't have any context. And it also meant we could make allies who then, if they saw that we do bring actually some value into it, they started advocating for our work too, which was great. Another thing that we changed was the testing. Now, anytime there would be a usability testing planned, I would ask the researcher or the UX designer, when is it planned? And when do we need to hand off the designs for the testing, so we have the copy finalized until then, or the first draft, of course. And I would also chip in with some questions I had about the content, and this really helped us improve it a lot, because we could finally know what's wrong and what's working and what's not working. And we, of course, did some A/B tests as well if we weren't sure which of the versions isn't really working the best. Another thing on our list is content tests or tests dedicated solely to content, and that's something we're still working on. We just had the first one like last month, so we're not really good at it, but we definitely want to test just the content specifically with various research practice, so we actually know how it performs there. And this is almost the last thing, prioritizing and narrowing down your focus. I think that if you want to do all of this, if you want to get included to meetings, if you want to work on the designs from the start, you definitely have to prioritize. You can't do it all at the same time. For us, it really helped that we got a new writer on the team last year, and that's when we started to be a part of various domains, or like each of us has a dedicated domain or two, and we work solely with the designers and researchers and product managers on that domain, which means that it's easier for us to plan, it's easier to track the results and actually to prove the value of our work. And also we can then be of more value to them when they need us, and at any time we could be there. For example, there's a Monday warm-up or kickoff. We would go there and we would decide on the plan for the week together with the rest of the team, and we would work on the same thing. And finally, this is a final advice I have here, but I'm actually guilty of not doing it myself yet. But it's definitely on our list, and it's something that we have to do, or everybody has to do, if they want to stay sane and, you know, keep things sustainable, and that's doing less. It means that we have to start thinking more strategically about our work, probably educating others within the team to do some parts of the content work on their own, and bringing us in there for more strategic decisions or things that actually do need somebody right there at the time. So to sum it up, I think we can say that we got the seat at the table. Like now I have to say no to some meetings because I have too many of them. So we asked questions, we got ourselves invited to meetings, we started collaborating with others or initiated it. We started testing our content, we narrowed down our focus, and now we're also trying to do a little bit less and more effectively. And you might be thinking that this is all nice, but what does it actually mean for you? What if you don't know how to start or where to go to actually advocate for bringing in some UX writing power? So if you are a writer and you feel like you're not valued, you have basically two options. Either you keep like complaining, or you just follow some of my steps that I did and that helped me. You can pick whatever works for you. It's just whatever size fits, and you'll see how it's working. I can guarantee that at least someone in your team will recognize that your work actually makes it better, and it's easier to do their job as well when they have you by their side and when you have a team partner to actually collaborate on things. But if you don't have any content person on the team, it's a little bit trickier. Like first, I linked some resources at the end of the presentation. So what you could do is to like read some articles or case studies and bring it to your manager or someone who's responsible for hiring, and tell them that there are some numbers and content actually is valuable. Or you can just take the same advice as from before and start with yourself. And I think that's something that every UX or product designer or anybody else on the team can do. You can just start improving your content design skills on your own and expand your T-shaped skills, design skills, so you will be even more valuable for hiring managers. So how to do it? There are four simple steps for that. Another step, sorry, I have too many, I know, but this is the final one, I promise. So first, if you want to start working closely with the content in mind, you first have to do your content research. You need to know how your users speak, what they need to hear at what point, and basically how to talk to them in their language. You can do it during usability testings when you actually ask about the content and listen to them directly. Or if you can't afford it, you can perhaps ask other team like your customer support or tech support teams and check the actual messages or emails coming from the customers so you know how they talk about the problems and what's the best way to explain them to them. Another thing, the second one, is that you have to design content first, which I really hope I'm stating the obvious here. Really, no lorem ipsum, of course. You can't start designing anything with this. So you have to have the content mindset from the initial stage of the project. You have to think about the content hierarchy, about the information you need to provide or the user needs to hear, and have the empathy to answer the questions they actually have at the stage. So you can just being a content designer yourself with this. And to do this, you probably need to learn some basic writing principles as well, unless you have somebody that will help you polish the text at the end, like a marketing copywriter or somebody else on the team. And you can do it easily. There are countless resources online, and I'll show you some later on. It's in the end of the presentation that we could share. Or if you don't want to read and like practice the writing, you can just get an external professional, some senior writer or somebody who would actually help to coach your team on how to think with content in mind from the start. And my final point is leveraging the results. So let's say that the previous 3 steps you do actually bring some results. You can test your content and see if they do. And if yes, it's really a good, I forgot what I wanted to say, of course, but it's basically something that will help you advocate for hiring the UX writer or any content designer on the team. Because if you manage to improve the experience by just following these 3 simple things, and by thinking about content and doing all of this after a bit of studying and practicing, then an experienced writer will probably help you even more, and you can say it to your boss, and I'm sure they will listen this time. So to sum it up, it's about doing your research, the content research, of course, designing content first, learning how to write, and leveraging the results it all brings. And that's the end of my presentation. And here at the end, there are some resources for all of you, so you can just check them out afterwards. There are many more, but I think this will help in any of the cases. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. Questions time. The first one from Slido is, UX researchers are usually also overworked. How do you advocate getting some of their capacity for copy testing?
Okay, so we don't really have this. I mean, of course, our researchers also have a lot of work, but I think that they do a pretty good job of advocating for themselves. So we never had this problem ourselves. But I don't think that you necessarily need to do this. You can just, start do the testing yourself as well. You can either use the resources you have, like I mentioned, the customer support or anything like that, or you can schedule some interviews with your users on your own. There are pretty nice resources up there. Like there's this page, UX content. Wait, I forgot how it's called now, but it was UX Writing Collective. It's UX Content Collective now. And they have a specialized course on content testing. So for example, you can try that. Or you can just, anything you do, and when you try to test, I think there will be some results for sure, even if you have just a couple of interviews on your own.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? There's one. Hooray! I'm not alone.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for opening my mind about UX copywriters, that they're also using design thinking, which is kind of obvious, but never popped into my mind. And I have quite ugly question, so don't feel
Okay.
bad. Do you have any example of like when the when the copy question or copy thinking was like very useful in the beginning of the process? So like I would like to know if you remember some specific experiment.
I don't know if I have any specific thing in my mind, but overall, it really helps where you have two people with two different specializations in there right at the beginning, which means that you can really feedback on each other's work right away, and it helped us many times where if there would have been just one person or one product designer on the team, we wouldn't have figured out so many things right at the start, and this just kind of made or helped us get the things moving in the right direction. But I don't know, there have been projects that were actually mostly led by content in our team, or like by us, like our chatbot, for example, where it's all about the text and the conversations and conversation design. Of course, there is another specialization called conversation design, but there are not that many of them in here, and we don't have any such person in our team, so we had to lead the way and figure out what the users need to help, and it's been pretty useful so far, or at least like helped us decrease contacts by a lot and helped our users resolve what they need quite quickly without calling us or waiting on queue.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's kind of secondary designer, but with another specialization.
Kind of,
right?
yeah. I mean, we are called content designers as well in our team, and I think that's what you could say. It's another like skill in the T-shaped skill box that any designer can actually have, but we specialize on it, so it's like, I don't know, we're better at it because of that.
Right, thanks.
Speaking of awful questions,
Okay.
how good writers do you think UX UX designers are? How much do you have to rewrite in designs?
This is a tricky question, but it's really individual. That's like everything. Like someone who actually doesn't need those four steps I had there, the advice I shared at the end, is probably better at it because they already think about the content from the start, and it's much easier to work with them because they understand. Some other people don't have. They are more maybe stronger in the visual design or some other parts of design, and they are not so strong in there. But the collaboration actually solves it all because we never or we rarely get to some designs that were like finalized beforehand, so we don't have to fix them. We just need to find the right way together. So, yeah.
Any question from audience now? Okay. How do you do UX copywriting for other languages? What is your recommended process?
We write everything in English, so we don't do such a thing, but we do have a localization team that's dedicated solely to working with external translators to do this for us. But we try thinking about the other languages when writing the original copy and just count with the differences there can be, and usually make some notes or explain the tricky part, even though there shouldn't be, because it should be understandable on its own. But we try to explain it to our localization team that then discuss it with the translators so they understand what it's about. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Hello. So how do you know that your copy you wrote is right? Is it through user testing, or like how can you really like say that okay, I'm happy with it, it's good?
I think this is the hardest question so far. I don't think that anybody can ever know whether that it's actually right, because it can always be better. Like when we look at any things we did a couple of months ago or even weeks, we would be able to do them better now because we learn along the way. But yeah, I guess it's user tests. Like we try to include the questions about the copy into the research plans. So the researcher or whoever's leading the interview actually asks about it, and we see whether the users understand it. So if they do, I guess our work is done and it's all good. If they don't, we have to iterate and try and change it. But when it comes to measuring, I think we're just finding our way how to do it. Of course, A/B tests tell us something, but not a lot. So I don't know. It's hard to answer this, but I think that at least we can say whether it works or not up to some level.
Okay, I would have also another question. If you could share with us, how did you learn writing, or how did you become UX writer or content writer?
Okay, so I did not study writing or anything like, or I did study translation and languages with some specifics in linguistics and so on, but I never studied English writing as such, and I actually didn't think about becoming a writer myself before. I didn't think it's possible when you're not a native speaker and so on. But then I started collaborating. I said I was in Kiwi before I joined the UX team. So in my previous role, I did collaborate with UX writers and with the designers, and I just like figured out I like it, and they told me I'm not bad at it. So I actually started learning more, and there are countless articles about how to do this right. I also attended a course at the UX Content Collective, which is like the beginning or I don't know, like the introductory course to UX writing. That takes a couple of months, and that's it, basically practice, I guess. When the time came and they opened up a position, I tried, and like, you know, I did a practical test, and I'm learning ever since, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last chance. Okay, then I have last question for you from Slido. What kind of content do you create most often? Is it microcopy, or is it a destination annotations? Hearing that for the first time, damn. Or anything else?
I don't know, all of them. Like we do everything. Like basically we have transactional emails, which is like email content. We do the chatbots, that's the conversation design, smaller pieces of text. We have FAQ articles that are longer, and of course do the smaller UI in like for example, if you know our webpage, you know Kiwi, there's not a lot of text in the search tab, and we kind of do just the buttons there and like, you know, iterate in there.
Thank you very much. If you have any more questions, ask Lucka later and the leftovers, you know, or later in the pub. Thank you, Lucka, once again.